If you would please all stand for the blessing beginning of the reading of the Torah.
Barku et Yahweh Hamivarak. Together. Barku et Yahweh Hamivarak Le'elam Vahed. Baruch Yahweh Hamivarak Le'elam Vahed. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam asher bakar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Yahweh. Together. Baruch Shemo noten haTorah. Amen.
If you'd remain standing for the reading of the Torah. It's Deuteronomy 21:10 through 25:19.
When you go to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God hands them over to you, and you take some of them prisoner, and if you see a beautiful woman among the captives, desire her and want to take her as your wife, you are to bring her into your house. She is to shave her head, trim her nails, remove the clothes she was wearing when she was taken prisoner, live in your house, and mourn for her father and mother a full month. After that, you may have sexual relations with her and be her husband, and she will be your wife. Then, if you are not satisfied with her, you are to let her go where she wants, but you must not sell her or treat her as merchandise, because you have humiliated her. If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved bear him sons, and if the unloved wife has the firstborn son, when that man gives what he has to his sons as an inheritance, he is not to show favoritism to the son of the loved wife as his firstborn over the firstborn of the unloved wife. He must acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the unloved wife, by giving him 2 shares of his estate, for he is the first fruits of his virility. He has the rights of the firstborn. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father or mother and doesn't listen to them even after they discipline him, his father and mother are to take hold of him and bring him to the elders of his city, to the gate of his hometown. They will say to the elders of his city, "The son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He doesn't obey us. He's a glutton and a drunkard." Then all the men of his city will stone him to death. You must purge the evil from you, and all Israel will hear it and be afraid. If anyone is found guilty of an offense deserving the death penalty and is executed, and you hang his body on a tree, you are not to leave the corpse on the tree overnight, but are to bury him that day. For anyone hung on a tree is under God's curse. You must not defile the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. If you see your brother Israelite's ox or sheep straying, do not ignore it. Make sure you return it to your brother. If your brother does not live near you, you don't know him, you are to bring the animal to your home to remain with you until your brother comes looking for it. Then you can return it to him. Do the same for his donkey, his garment, or anything your brother has lost and you have found. You must not ignore it. If you see your brother's donkey or ox fallen down on the road, do not ignore it. Help him lift it up. A woman is not to wear male clothing, and a man is not to put on a woman's garment. For everyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord your God. If you come across a bird's nest with chicks or eggs, either in a tree or on the ground along the road, and the mother is sitting on the chicks or eggs, do not take the mother along with the young. You may take the young for yourself, but be sure to let the mother go free, so that you may prosper and live long. If you build a new house, make a railing around your roof so that you don't bring blood guilt on your house if someone falls from it. Do not plant your vineyard with two types of seed, otherwise the entire harvest, both the crop you plant and the produce of the vineyard, will be defiled. Do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Do not wear clothes made of both wool and linen. Make tassels on the four corners of the outer garment you wear. If a man marries a woman, has sexual relations with her, and comes to hate her, and accuses her of shameful conduct, and gives her a bad name, saying, I married this woman and was intimate with her, but didn't find any evidence of her virginity, the young woman's father and mother will take the evidence of her virginity and bring it to the city elders at the city gate. The young woman's father will say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man as a wife, but he hates her. He has accused her of shameful conduct, saying, I didn't find any evidence of your daughter's virginity, but here is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. They will spread out the cloth before the city elders. Then the elders of that city will take the man and punish him. They will also fine him 100 silver shekels and give them to the young woman's father, because the man gave an Israelite virgin a bad name. She will remain his wife. He cannot divorce her as long as he lives. But if this accusation is true and no evidence of the young man's virginity is found, they will bring the woman to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city will stone her to death, for she has committed an outrage in Israel by being promiscuous while living in her father's house. You must purge the evil from you. If a man is discovered having sexual relations with another man's wife, both the man who has had sex with the woman and the woman must die. You must purge the evil from Israel. If there is a young woman who is a virgin engaged to a man, and another man encounters her in the city and sleeps with her, take the two of them out to the gate of that city and stone them to death. The young woman, because she did not cry out in the city, and the man, because he has violated his neighbor's fiancée. You must purge the evil from you. But if the man encounters an engaged woman in the open country, and he seizes and rapes her, only the man who raped her must die. Do nothing to the young woman, because she is not guilty of an offense deserving death. This case is just like one in which a man attacks his neighbor and murders him. When he found her in the field, the engaged woman cried out, but there was no one to rescue her. If a man encounters a young woman, a virgin who is not engaged, takes hold of her and rapes her, and they are discovered, the man who raped her is to give the young woman's father 50 silver shekels, and she will become his wife because he violated her. He cannot divorce her as long as he lives. A man is not to marry his father's wife. He must not violate his father's marriage bed. No man whose testicles have been crushed or whose penis has been cut off may enter the Lord's assembly. No one of illegitimate birth may enter the Lord's assembly. None of his descendants, even to the 10th generation, may enter the Lord's assembly. No Ammonite or Moabite may enter the Lord's assembly. None of their descendants, even to the 10th generation, may ever enter the Lord's assembly. This is because they did not meet you with food and water on the journey after you came out of Egypt, and because Balaam, son of Beor from Pethor in Aram, Naharaim, was hired to curse you. Yet the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam, but he turned the curse into a blessing for you because the Lord your God loves you. Never pursue their welfare or prosperity as long as you have. Do not despise an Edomite because he is your brother. Do not despise an Egyptian because you were a resident alien in his land. Children born to them in the third generation may enter the Lord's assembly. When you encamped against your enemies, be careful to avoid anything offensive. If there is a man among you who is unclean because of a bodily emission during the night, he must go outside the camp. He may not come anywhere inside the camp. When evening approaches, he is to wash with water, and when the sun sets, he may come inside the camp. You are to have a place outside the camp and go there to relieve yourself. You are to have a digging tool in your equipment. When you relieve yourself, dig a hole with it and cover up your excrement. For the Lord your God walks throughout your camp to protect you and deliver your enemies to you. So your encampments must be holy. You must not see anything indecent among you, or he will turn away from you. Do not return a slave to his master when he has escaped from his master to you. Let him live among you wherever he wants within your city gates. Do not mistreat him. No Israelite woman is to be a cult prostitute, and no Israelite man is to be a cult prostitute. Do not bring a female prostitute's wages or a male prostitute's earning into the house of the Lord your God to fulfill any vow, because both are detestable to the Lord your God. Do not charge your brother interest on silver, food, or anything that can earn interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but you must not charge your brother Israelite interest, so that the Lord your God may bless you in everything you do in the land you are entering to possess. If you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not be slow to keep it, because he will require it of you, and it will be counted against you as sin. But if you refrain from making a vow, it will not be counted against you as sin. Be careful to do whatever comes from your lips, because you have freely vowed that you promise to the Lord your God. When you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat as many grapes as you want until you are full, but do not put any in your container. When you enter your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck heads of grain with your hand, but do not put a sickle to your neighbor's grain. If a man marries a woman, but she becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her, he may write her a divorce certificate, hand it to her, and send her away from his house. If after leaving his house she goes and becomes another man's wife, and the second man hates her, writes her a divorce certificate, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house, or if he dies, the first husband who sent her away may not marry her again after she has been defiled, because that would be detestable to the Lord. You must not bring guilt to the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. When a man takes a bride, he must not go out with the army or be liable for any duty. He is free to stay at home for 1 year so that he can bring joy to the wife he has married. Do not take a pair of grindstones or even the upper millstone as security for a debt, because that is like taking a life as security. If a man is discovered kidnapping one of his Israelite brothers, whether he treats him as a slave or sells him, the kidnapper must die. You must purge the evil from you. Be careful with a person who has a case of serious skin disease, following carefully everything the Levitical priests instruct you to do. Be careful to do as I have commanded them. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the journey after you left Egypt. When you make a loan of any kind to your neighbor, do not enter his house to collect what he offers as security. Stand outside while the man you are making the loan to bring the security out to you. If he is a poor man, do not sleep with the garment he has given as security. Be sure to return it to him at sunset. Then he will sleep in it and bless you, and this will be counted as righteousness to you before the Lord your God. Do not oppress a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether one of your Israelite brothers or one of the resident aliens is a town in your land. You are to pay him his wages each day before the sun sets because he is poor and depends on them. Otherwise he will cry out to the Lord against you, and you will be held guilty. Fathers are not to be put to death for their children, and children are not to be put to death for their fathers. Each person will be put to death for his own sin. Do not deny justice to a resident alien or fatherless child, and do not take a widow's garment as security. Remember, you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this. When you reap the harvest in your field, and you forget a sheaf in the field, do not go back to get it. It is to be left for the resident alien, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you knock down the fruit from your olive tree, do not go over to the branches again. What remains will be for the resident alien, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, do not glean what is left. What remains will be for the resident alien, the fatherless, and the widow. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this. If there is a dispute between men, they are to go to court, and the judges will hear their case. They will clear the innocent and condemn the guilty. If the guilty party deserves to be flogged, the judge will make him lie down and be flogged in his presence with the number of lashes appropriate for his crime. He may be flogged for 40 lashes and no more. Otherwise, if he is flogged with more lashes than these, your brother will be degraded in your sight. Do not muzzle an ox while it treads out grain. When brothers live on the same property and one of them dies without a son, the wife of the dead man may not marry a stranger outside the family. Her brother-in-law is to take her as his wife, have sexual relations with her, and perform the duty of a brother-in-law for her. The first son she bears will carry on the name of the dead brother, so his name will not be blotted out from Israel. But if the man doesn't want to marry his sister-in-law, she is to go to the elders at the city gate and say, "My brother-in-law refuses to preserve his brother's name in Israel. He isn't willing to perform the duty of a brother-in-law for me." The elders of his city will summon him and speak with him. If he persists and says, "I don't want to marry her," then his sister-in-law will go up to him in the sight of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, and spit it on his face. Then she will declare, "This is what is done to a man who will not build up his brother's house, and his family name in Israel will be the house of the man whose sandal was removed." If two men are fighting with each other, and the wife of one steps in to rescue her husband from the one striking him, and she puts out her hand and grabs his genitals, you are to cut off her hand. Do not show pity. Do not have differing weights in your bag, one heavy and one light. Do not have differing dry measures in your house, a larger and a smaller. You must have a full and honest weight, a full and honest dry measure, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God has given you. For everyone who does such things and acts unfairly is detestable to the Lord your God. Remember what the Amalekites did to you on the journey after you left Egypt. They met you along the way and attacked all your strugglers from behind when you were tired and weary. They did not fear God. When the Lord your God gives you rest from all the enemies around you in the land, the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance, blot out the memory of Amalek under heaven. Do not forget.
You may be seated. That took a long time, okay? Took a long time. We're going to try to hit these in order. The title of it is When You Go. It's also been suggested that this is something that explains the Lord's true and loving kindness. Now, you just listen to all of that. How much of it sounded kind? In the ears and the minds that we have now, how can it be kind to talk about soldiers killing everyone in a village and taking one of the women as their wife and bringing them back? Does that sound kind to anybody? Well, the truth behind that is if they just left, she would die. And because there's no one left to take care of her, no family, nothing, she would die. And so the soldier is supposed to bring her back into her house and then honor and respect her, let her grieve the death of her family. And if he still is attracted to her, then he can marry her after 30 days. Our children, how many, if you talking to other people in, not in the Hebraic roots or biblical roots movement, how often do you hear the thing, well, we're not supposed to really stone our children, we'd go to jail, right? Anybody heard that? How can that be loving kindness? Well, in all of Jewish recorded history, which they were pretty good at writing things down, judgments of what happened, there is no record ever of this disobedient son who would not listen to anyone and was a drunkard and a sluggard and a lazy person being taken in front of the city council and stoned to death. Why? Because it didn't happen. It was not acceptable in that community for that kind of behavior. And if we don't allow it, if it's not allowed, then time over time, it doesn't happen. You know, when we hear, how many people have heard, all's fair in love and war? Well, the Torah doesn't say that. It says there's rules for love and war. And we just heard a lot of them explained. And those rules are God's loving kindness, because if we obey them, then bad things won't happen to us. King David, didn't discipline his sons. And because what it says is he loved them too much for him to chastise them, to punish them. Well, it didn't work out so well for the sons. One of them murdered, another one raped, another one tried to usurp his throne and ended up being killed by David's soldiers. So we need to pay attention to that. If it's not allowed, it doesn't happen. How many sitcom TVs, the example of what our society is teaching, how many teenagers in sitcom TVs are obedient, do what their parents tell them, industrious? You know, our society, we talked about this in Torah studies in the past, our society changes the rules. We accept a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Why? It wasn't all that long ago that you could get arrested for dressing indecently. Now we have naked bike rides through a city? Really? That no word is that's not in here that you can do that. In fact, quite the opposite. It's talked about modesty and how you're supposed to cover yourself. Lost and found, another popular one. Finders keepers, losers weepers. According to this, that's not what we're supposed to do, even if we don't know the owner. You know, how many things have you lost that did have your name on it that you just wish somebody would have sent it back? It may not have been valuable to anybody but you, and maybe the person that found it didn't even take it to keep for themselves. They just saw it and tossed it in the trash. We don't know. We don't know what's important to other people. Lost and found. Having worked at a ski area for 25 plus years, by the end of the season, the lost and found is pretty extensive. Why don't people come looking for those things? You know, if you've got a pair of ski gloves that cost you $120, you're going to notice that your hands got cold since you didn't have them. Why don't they come into the lost and found and look for them? Because our society, again, has changed. They don't think they would have brought them back in. So somebody probably just took them home with them. And we lose a little bit more and a little bit more. Everybody know who I mean when I say Gladys Kravitz? No? Okay. Gladys Kravitz was the nosy neighbor that looked over the fence and was always in other people's business. Right? When we say mind your own business, we're probably thinking of Gladys Kravitz, you know, peeking over the fence, you know, mind your own business. But are we supposed to mind our own business? If we're leaving here and Miranda's trying to load up half a dozen tables, 250 pounds worth of equipment, and we all walk past, and, you know, well, Miranda must be doing something else again. Or do we help? We're supposed to help. I mean, when God talks about this Torah section being an explanation of loving kindness, helping your neighbor with a heavy load, whether it's a physical heavy load or an emotional heavy load, it's a requirement. We're supposed to do that. We're supposed to take care of each other. The next bullet point, dress the part. A man's not to wear a woman's clothing, and a woman's not to wear man's clothing. how far would we get with that law today? Why? Again, it's because our society has accepted a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and you don't know what the lines are. I mean, if my daughter was playing on the soccer team and some guy came into her locker room and took a shower because he identifies as a woman, I might be breaking some commandments. And now our laws, the ones that we've replaced God's laws with, our laws say you have to respect that. How far out of phase are we? You know, what would it take to retune the radar to put us back on course? When I started looking up Ketitzi, and Gita can probably saw it on Alpha Beta, a lot of the Torah teachers sum this whole lesson down to the baby birds and the bird, mother bird. That's what they hone in on. And it seemed like there was a whole lot more there than just the baby birds and the mother bird. Comments on why you think it's okay to take the young and leave the mother. Get the other mic right. Oh, you got it. Anybody? Deer hunters. How many deer hunters? Boy, we are alone, brother. Venison is good, okay? Just
It's
saying.
because the mother reproduces, and it's in all nature. That's why we hunt the bucks, so that you can keep it going, keep the family line going, which is very important in Torah. It's all about family and keeping that going.
And we raise horses, all right? We need we need 2 stallions because we need them from 2 different bloodlines. But we have 25 mares because if you want to grow and have horses, you need more mares than you do stallions. The least of the commandments, that is what this part about the baby birds and the mother bird is called the least of the commandments. What did Yeshua say about whoever teaches to break the least of these? Was he referring to this particular one? If it's the least of the commandments and everything else is more important, is that what he was talking about? Well, I think he was talking about all of them, but that's the bottom, that's where the floor is. It goes up from there. And the next part of this is unequally yoked. And I've got a couple of yokes up here. They're a little different size. They'd fit different animals. When I talk about unequally yoked, we have a tendency to think that a Christian should not marry a non-Christian, or a believer should not marry an unbeliever. And that's pretty good advice. But unequally yoked also means in their zeal or pursuit of how much energy they're going to put into it. Barbara, right? She's committed to the Lord. She would give it everything she has. She would work very hard. Darren, very committed to the Lord. He would work very hard. If I gave them both the assignment to team up and put these yokes on, and said for 10 minutes, you've got to give your maximum effort to push all of these pews out into the driveway. Well, intent doesn't matter. Barbara could try with everything she's got. And that, whatever they're trying to push, is going to go around in a circle, and around in a circle, and around in a circle. Until he's so exhausted that they may move it an inch or two. So unequally yoked is not always what we think it is. And if you're putting together a ministry team or a business, and you've got two people and they're committed, but they just don't get along. They don't get along. And, what do we tend to say? Work it out. You got to figure out how to do it. We need well-rounded employees. Well, you might be better off to put them each with somebody that's more like-minded, more equally yoked, so that they can get the task done that you want to get done. Sir.
Thank you. I was just something, before we skip over it, there's a part that I wanted to comment on where he says, if you build a new house, you shall make basically a guardrail around. The first thing I thought of is like a commercial building. When you work on a commercial building, that's actually in the Torah to put guardrails around so you don't fall off. And I just thought that was really interesting. I wanted to comment on that.
And that's a great point. In the Torah, most of our civil law is in there. If you loan something to a neighbor and he takes it to the lake and breaks it, it's the neighbor's responsibility to fix it. If you go to the lake with him and you're using whatever it is together, it's not the neighbor's responsibility. Even though he asked, you went along with him, it's now your responsibility. So tort claims are addressed in here. Who's most responsible? Who is most responsible? And now, how are most tort claims decided? Who has the most money, and what happens to them if the jury sitting out there is not as rich as the guy that owns the company that's getting sued? The jury says, we got to take it from the rich guy and give it to the little guy, even if that's an unjust thing to do, because they're not following God's laws. When we talk about loving kindness and we talk about sex outside of marriage and how severe the penalty for that was, often stoned until death, how would that fly in our community right now? It wasn't all that long ago that if it occurred, it was done in secret. Not the 18-year-old high school student telling his parents he's moving in with his 18-year-old high school student sweetheart and they're going to live at their mom's house. And that seems to be acceptable now. It didn't used to be. It shouldn't be. So many things have been chipped away from this, from the Torah. When we look at it, things sound unreasonable.
I think, too, about our society today and thinking about men wearing women's clothing and that is detestable. It's an abomination in God's sight. And I see many people not care that that is detestable. And shame has a different definition today, and it's not okay to have shame. But really, I mean, shame is good and needed, but with hope. And I see that perhaps the not caring about being detestable in the sight of God shows that there is a lack of hope. Because if you do feel that shame, there also needs to be that hope, that belief that with change, that with repentance, there can be love. And I think that part of that is from the, I'm trying to think of the right word, the apathy, the giving upness, the laziness, there's another word there. I know you guys know what I'm talking about, that lack of drive to do the work that it takes for repentance, to do the work, the painful work, to sit with your pain and to get to that place of hope, and believing that hope is there, believing that you can get to that place where God is no longer seeing your works as detestable, but to believe that deep love is there, that he will say, good job, well done, good and faithful servant. That hope is so needed.
Not much I can add to the thought there. It's true. The danger that some of our brothers and sisters have run the course is they will take one of these and they'll run that up the flagpole, and that's the rallying cry. Okay, well, sin is sin. We need to be covered for all of your sin, whether it's telling a lie or being a transvestite. It's both sin. It both needs the covering blood of Yeshua, and our repentance and his forgiveness. And when we run one sin so high that it excludes, that you overlook everything else, well, at least they're not doing that. Gita's right.
So to go along with what Miranda was talking about, I just love, it's interesting in this parsha too, there's so many things that are connected to other events and stories in the scripture, just like the loved wife and the unloved wife, Rachel and Leah, and then so many other stories, the Moabite and the 10th generation. And we know that that David's great-great-great-grandmother was a Moabite, So there are so many things that hearken to other things in the scripture, but this is my most favorite. And some of you may have heard this before and some may not have, but the first time I heard this, it was just incredible to me. But in chapter 24, when it talks about a man who takes a wife and then divorces her for her uncleanness, that is Yeshua in us. And that because of our whoring after other gods and Israel's whoring after other gods, that he, after having engaged at Sinai, had a covenant with them, a brit for marriage, that he gave them this writ of divorcement. And it says, especially after she's gone with others, that he can't marry her. He wants us. He wants to be married to us. But it says in his word that he cannot do that. So he had to find a way to do that. And the way he found to do that was to die. Because now it's not the same man who made that covenant with us who's coming to marry us. And that's just an incredible picture of his loving kindness, that he would find a way to do that for us that is within his law, not outside of his law, but within his law to do that for us. And everything that we're looking at in this parsha, to me, is all about great loving kindness, about going beyond what is just fair, but doing what's loving and kind in a situation. And for us to have that mind of Yeshua, that we will be able to do that to the animals, to our family, to our friends, our neighbors, in every situation in our community. If we can do that, that will be when we have the mind of Yeshua.
And on top of that, if you look at us, this seems like it's pretty harsh towards a woman's infidelity here. The man has 2 wives, but that doesn't say anything about the woman. And that may sound really, really harsh, but whose bride are we? All of us. So all those things that are put on the woman, we need to look at our house and keep our house clean, because that's the relationship that Yahweh wants to have with us, a faithful, dutiful, loving bride.
Both your Gita, that was really well said, and that was really well said too, Miranda. I think it's in Hosea, the prophet Hosea. I mean, we've all fallen short of his glory, and I think by his grace and mercy we get back on track. Before we get too far ahead, Mike, I really liked what you said about the different yokes for different purposes. But I also want to be careful how we look at this, because Yeshua actually spoke and he said that if we only love those who love us back, then what difference are we? And so I can see a potential problem if we get in the mindset with we're only with people like-minded. That could go to a place where I'm only going to do ministry with those people that are exactly like me. But often, God puts a strength with a weakness and makes complementary teams. And for us to get through some of that rub is also important, I think. So I just wanted to... Different animals, different purposes, yes, I got that part of it, but we cannot just flock to people who are exactly like us.
I could agree with that on your train of thought, but if you're talking about flock with people, if you both have the same mission, if you're looking, when you're teamed up with somebody. Now, we're not talking about the hard ground that the oxen were plowing through, right? And if you're teamed up with somebody to plow through that hard ground out there, to go out and find people who need to understand Yeshua, right? You need somebody yoked with you, and you can train them up. I mean, there's, disciples, they're learning. You can train up people to take on the yoke, and what you're going out to do, the work, they're not like-minded. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to go out there. So being yoked together is for a common purpose and common goal. What the work you're doing may have, they shouldn't be as the same. Why talk to anybody in here about why they should follow Torah? We all think that's what we should do. If we're talking to somebody else who doesn't think that's what we should do, we need to be able to explain it to them.
That's a good word. And I want to comment on Gita's and Miranda. They're talking about the loving kindness. This Torah portion is all about loving kindness and defining it. The stoning of the son, people have problems with that. But it's like you said, it's what you get away with. why that never happened was not just because the son was afraid he was going to get stoned, but it's the parents raising the son up that didn't allow that in his son's life, and they taught him from little on. They spanked his butt. They, like you said with David, he didn't discipline his kids. That's how your kids will turn out if you don't. So this Torah passage, even the stoning of the son thing, is loving kindness to have those rules down. That's the failure of America. We didn't stop disciplining our kids. And the Bible says you hate your son. You spare the rod. You hate him. It's a form of hate, not love. So when we're talking about being loving and kind, it requires discipline. Thank Yahweh that he has disciplined me over and over very harshly because of his love for me. And we got to remember that not to define love and kindness as just tolerating anything there is. We got riots going on because we're tolerating it, because they're tolerating it. There's no consequences, and I think it's a sad thing for those rioters and their children that are learning this and have no hope because of it.
You're absolutely right. And it's by what we accept. While Darren's bringing the microphone back there, I pushed a police car around until I retired. I know you don't, Rick will be back soon, so no more military or police stories. If the speed limit is posted 25 and the department doesn't enforce anything under 40 miles an hour, what's the speed limit on that road? 40 miles an hour. And if you get an honest judge who drives that same road at 40 miles an hour, if somebody brings in a ticket for 35 and the judge is going to say, if he's honest, no, you've changed the speed limit by not enforcing it at 25 to 40 miles an hour. The only place that I see speed limits really enforced is school zones. 1 mile an hour over, you get a ticket. And they are expensive. And so guess what? People respect the school zone sign. They slow down.
I just wanted to add a thought when Gabriel was talking. I grew up in a ranching world with horses. And the yokes, it wouldn't be unnatural, actually, in a team of horses to have a small yoke like that and a large yoke like that. In a big team, and I'm talking 4 or more, if you look, the main horse is the closest one on the right or the left next to the carriage. That's the one where the rein goes directly to. He's usually the big boy and the most gentle, and he kind of pulls the weight of the little guy that's out front. And so the younger horses, or the less experienced horses, were more towards the middle or in the very front, because the big boy in the back could kind of direct them. So I think of like Paul, who brought many younger people with them. Were they the same yoke? No, but they were equally yoked in their mission for God. So I appreciate what Gabriel had to say in that we don't always have to be the same, but the yoking to that carriage and getting God's work done is of the same purpose.
And we did run out of time. Close in prayer, and if anybody has a 1 or 2 sentence prayer that they want to pray right now, we will bring the microphone to you.
so much for your sacrifice. Thank you so much that you have done it all. You have done it all. We love you and we want to show our obedience to you so that we can show you that we love you. Thank you.